Hey everyone, this is Charles again, and I'm back to do more Kamen Rider reviews. And this time I'm following up from Kamen Rider Kabuto with Kamen Rider Den-O. This is going to be the first of a few videos I have on Den-O to cover the basic roleplay toys and such. And as such, I am not going to be focused on this guy, which is the twist action version of Den-O's sword form. Instead, I'm going to be focused on this, the Den-O driver, I think? Yeah, Den-O driver. The belt. Before I begin reviewing the belt, I'm going to cover some of the stuff that happens, well, not some of the stuff that happens in the show, but basically what the show is all about. I'm going to do that for two reasons. One, there's a lot to cover, and not all of it gets mentioned in some other reviews that I'm aware of, not having seen all of them. And secondly, because, well, this belt has a gimmick that's kind of interesting and loud. So let me get started with a few things. First off, it's important to realize that when discussing Den-O, there are two big influences to keep in mind. One is the design motif, trains, and two is the concept of legends and time. There's a lot of time travel in the show. It's kind of important and a staple for it, and it's, as such, it gets confusing. Very confusing. Flowchart level confusing. So we'll start with the trains because that's a little easier. Essentially, Den-O, and if you can look, I guess it's not really obvious looking directly head on at him. Yeah, focus right there. The Den-O designs are based off of trains, specifically the high-speed electromagnetic trains that are run throughout Japan. And here's where I'll pause for someone watching this video to say to themselves the infamous Raul Julia as M. Bison line from Street Fighter, the movie. Okay, good. I'm glad you cut that out of your system. But yes, he's based off trains. And in fact, his base form, which is not this one you see before you, is called the platform. So, there you go. Speaking of plat, or, plat, let's discuss, well, the platform of legends. All of Den-O's forms are based off or inspired by legends. This is most obvious with the wing form, which is a movie exclusive, which is based and inspired by the Swan Prince, or the Swan Lake, the Swan Lake fairy tale. But all the others, which I will not discuss in detail, except for their embodiment, their imagined counterpart, are all based off Japanese folklore or such. It's fairly obvious with Momotaro's seen here in sword form, if you know the story, which revolves around a child inside a giant peach. There's a really good illustration of this if you watch Inshin Sentai Bokenger, I think it is. There's an episode towards the mid towards the latter half of the season where Boken Red and Boken Silver are not getting along, and along comes this giant peach and it has a child inside of it, and they have to care for it and raise it. It's the typical Red and 6th Ranger don't get along episode, but it's actually kind of educational to watch. But, you know, you don't have to. In any case, Momotaro's here is based off that, which is why his head, the faceplate right there, let me see if I can zoom in on that. If you slide the two heads halves together and then kind of tilt them outward at an angle, they look very much like a giant peach, as opposed to the front half of a train. Unless you're Sean, aka Cybertron Axe, in which case, when I was showing him the first two clips of Den-O and educating him about it, it looks like a butt is coming down across his face. Yes, Sean, I remember. And now I have shamed you. In any case, let's look down here at the belt. Now, as I said before, this is about show about trains and timing and legends. And the embodiment of this legends, actually the personification through which we view this, is a poor fellow named Ryotaro Nogami. And I'm going to call him Nogami from here on out because it's easier to say and for another reason. Nogami, according to pre-show materials that we saw released, is the world's biggest loser. And I don't mean that in a harsh way, it's just that he happens to have the worst luck in the world. This is the kind of guy who would literally get all of the lottery tickets that have already been scratched off. In fact, in the first few minutes of episode 1, through a remarkable series of coordinated events, he ends up stuck up a tree on his bike. He also takes possibly the worst beatdown I have seen outside of Office Space from a Japanese gang of hoodlums and their leader. Yeah. It should be noted that according to those materials, Nogami was also a freelance photographer, much like Kamen Rider Ryuki was. I can't remember his name. I didn't really see him with a camera at all throughout the show, so maybe that was something that was dropped, or maybe I just missed something or am not remembering it. In any case, Nogami's one saving grace is his older sister Ari, who has cared for him since their parents died. Yeah, that sucks. Ari is an example of Japanese cliche number 147, the perfect housewife / mother. See also Kasumi Tendo from Ranma 1/2 or Belle Dandy from Oh My Goddess. She is picture perfect, a fine beauty without being sexy, classy, innocent, gentle, caring, you name it. She is literally made out of all the nice, wonderful, sweet things that you can think of and then be sick about. To help care for herself and for her younger brother, who gets crapped on repeatedly, she runs a coffee bar called the Milk Dripper. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, you know, I've eaten it. I've had Starbucks coffee, I've eaten there. That's a little expensive. Can she really afford to do that? And the answer is yes, because apparently from the time the open sign goes in the window until it closes, the Milk Dripper is packed with her admirers, all of whom fawn and swoon over her. But none of them are apparently able to get her attention long enough for them to confess or to molest her. But this is a kid show, so I'm assuming the confession would be as far as they go. Now, there are a couple more noteworthy guys in there, but really they're just comic relief, and they're not really important. What is important is that Nogami has yet another problem. You see, in addition to all the previously known examples of his life sucking, he is also a singularity point, which is a being that can exist outside of time. At least as far as this show is concerned. Okay. I don't know how a being can exist outside of time, but we'll roll with it. Mainly because this goes back to the first part of the episode, where you see the Den liner itself, which is the train of time, that crosses through time and apparently other dimensions, and becomes an important vehicle for Bandai to do pretty much whatever they want later on. I'm just saying. And it's important that Nogami is this singularity point, because now, with the power of the rider belt you see in front of him, he can become Kamen Rider Den-O. And it's important that it becomes Den-O for a couple of reasons. One, there's merchandise to sell. And two, it's the time of the year when monsters are starting to appear in Japan. And these monsters are known as Imagin. And if you're thinking that's kind of an oddly familiar sounding name, well, there's a reason for that. First, imagine. Okay. And there's the word, but there's also the latter half of the word, Jin, or genie. As my role players know out there, genies are not good creatures. Yeah, they can grant you a wish. They can grant you your heart's desire. Fortunately, they frequently try to screw you while doing it. Because genies are run by the DM. And screwing the players is always a good idea. Imagine are no different, and that they make a pact of sorts with someone to grant them their heart's desire, and in the process screw them. In the first episode rather, we meet the Bat Imagine, who makes a pact with the leader of the gang that beat up Nogami. And this pact is simple. The leader has lost a keychain. He wants it back. We're not told exactly why he wants a keychain back, but it's pretty important. Now, normally a normal Jin or a genie would, use some sort of magical ability to track down the keychain, or maybe he'll just conjure it right there on the spot for him. The Bat Imagine, it embarks on a more drastic course of action. It simply decides to fly around the area. It spots anyone with a keychain, flies down, snatches them off the ground, flies up about 30-50 feet, steals the keychain, and then lets them plummet to their death. Splat. Kamen Rider, everyone. So naturally, this falls to Nogami to, stop. Unfortunately, he's a puss. But that's where the good Imagine come in. Like Momotaro's, who's the first one we meet. Yeah. Get ready for that, hearing that annoying sound a lot. And I mean the first one. Momotaro's is a kind of example. He's one of the let me guess what's the best way to put this. He's one of the reasons why Den-O became so successful beyond its shelf life, and also one of the reasons why I kind of dislike Den-O today. But we'll get to that in a minute, or later. You see, Momotaro's, while he does at first want to make a contract or a wish, really just wants to come back and fight. He lives to fight. That's all he's really interested in doing it. He's also, as if he didn't have one cliche enough, the thief with the heart of gold, in that he wants to do good, but he doesn't want to admit it. Which leads him to act like a jerk, frequently. But he does the right thing. You smell the sarcasm. So naturally, with the assistance of another supporting cast character, Hana, who is a completely different rant later on, Momotaros ends up possessing Nogami spiritually. And later, and because of this, he gains a physical body later on. It's a little creepy when you think about it. I'm not gonna talk about the details of what happens when he possesses him. Suffice to say, he becomes a much more capable individual, and he can actually fight and kill the Bat Imagine. But he's just the first. You see, there's also these other buttons, and each of these buttons corresponds to another Imagine or another form. Going in order from red Momotaros, we have blue Eurotaros. And Eurotaros is, in many ways, the antithesis of Momotaros, in that he's fairly sly, doesn't want to fight anyone, kind of lazy, self-serving liar. A liar who lies for the sake of lying. He's not really a likable character, in my opinion, but he's got his own sense of humor, which includes mocking Momotaros by referring to him as senpai throughout most of the episodes. Unfortunately, he's also the only Imagine who can really fight well in water, which makes sense since he's based off a turtle. The third color here, orange, refers to the third form, of course, and the third Imagine, Kentaros. And Kentaros is a big old bear of an individual. And that's appropriate, because he's based off a bear. And just like a bear, he has a tendency to fall asleep. Actually, he's an narcoleptic. He will fall asleep pretty much in the middle of a sentence. At least until he hears someone, or thinks he hears someone crying out for help. And because he's a staunch traditionalist, in fact, if you actually hear his theme here in a little bit, he has to run out and save them. Very much a samurai type character. Someone who is not traditional in any sense of the word is the fourth form here, Ryutaros. Ryutaros is a punk. A punk who loves dance hip-hop. And it's Japanese dance hip-hop he loves. Which means he's a slightly more credible musician than Drake is right now. Ryutaros, when you see him, he frequently has a pair of earphones on, and words cannot describe how odd this looks on the suit, but it works. They roll with it. He's enormously powerful, in fact, that he can kick Momotaros out of Nogami whenever he feels like it, but he has a weakness for Ari. Nogami's older sister. And I don't mean like that, I just mean that he listens to her. In fact, there's one episode where Nogami has to text his sister to call him and tell him to stop, so that Ryutaros will stop what he's doing and focus on the task at hand. There are a couple of other Majin. I've mentioned the wing form one, Sig, who is incredibly arrogant, very much a pain in the ass. And of course the other two main supporting characters in the show, Hana, who has super anime girl strength and can punch an Imagine through the train wall, and the train owner, who is quite possibly the strangest character I've ever seen in Toku. If not, he's definitely in the top 3. And I believe Naomi, or Nami, or is her name? Who also works on the train and serves everyone coffee. But don't drink it because it may be toxic. But we're not really sure about that. Okay, so that's enough about me talking about the show. Let's look at the belt. Actually, let's look at another part of the belt before we talk about the belt, which is the pass. Here is the rider ticket. The rider ticket is used in conjunction with the rider pass, of course. Ta-da. But in the show, this is also used on a contract holder with an Imagine. By using this, they can ascertain where the Imagine went. And you're asking, why would the Imagine be missing? Well, when the Imagine fulfills its contract, such as in the first episode when it somehow finds the correct keychain, it does a neat trick. It grabs its contract holder, splits him wide open, and like creating a doorway, steps through, and then it snaps shut. Yeah. My thoughts exactly. And frequently the Imagine ends up back at the exact day, time, and day and hour that the event in question it was supposed to rectify or address occurred. In the first episode, the Bat Imagine goes back to the night. Well, it goes back several nights because the keychain he was tasked to find was the last gift of the gang leader's deceased mother, and he received that keychain the night of her death after she was already gone. So the Imagine goes back to that night and proceeds to wreak havoc. So the crew uses a ticket to go back in time with the Denliner, fight the Imagine, and kill it. They then bring the gang leader to the hospital bedside of his mother so that she can actually give him the keychain and he can say goodbye in person. Which is a very nice, touching, great intro. One of the best intros I've ever seen for a Kamen Rider show. The ticket has nice foil on one side, kind of a flat cardboard on the back, and some writing. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. And then we have the holder here. Down here in the corner is the circuitry, sort of for it. You have red, blue, purple, yellow, and you just slide it in there. Doesn't really stay too well, but doesn't have to. Now then, I'm gonna move this guy out of the way because he's not really needed right now. Let's look at the belt. There's a couple of really neat things going on with this belt. See, very nice silvery chrome. Plastic bands here. Connectors. The Den-O symbol. The buttons. this is actually important, not specifically for this belt by itself, but for something else. And on the back, of course, you can see everything. On the back is battery casing, push pin, and of course there's the stamp to Bandai 2006, made in China. And I imagine that's pretty much the same thing. Oh, 2007. Okay. So, I'm gonna fire this thing up. Oh, wait a minute. Let me show you the top, because I can't forget the top right there. The Den-O system. And warn you ahead of time that this thing is loud. So, bear with me, please. Here is the on-off switch. There you go. Fires up nice and loud. Let's go ahead and get into sword form. Okay, you're in sword form now. The only other sound effect you can make in this form and for this form and in others is the finishing attack, which I'll talk about later. And to do that, you need the pass again. Full charge. But let's say you're tired of being in sword form. Let's say you want to bring Mr. Liar out. Well, you have to hit the button over here. And again. There you go. Of course, for Kintage. And finally, for the goofy, annoying punk. Okay, and I'm gonna power this guy off. Yeah, that thing is loud, in case you haven't noticed. Now, why are you needing this to do that, to do all the changes? Well, in a neat design callback to its inspiration, there's an actual magnet inside here. Not a strong one, of course, but a magnet. So by using the magnet with the sensor inside the belt, you can charge and transform. If you have a regular, the old kitchen magnet that you use, you can actually use that to change and full charge with this belt as well. But that's pretty much all you can do with the belt. To do more, well, you need accessories. And I'll be back with that video shortly.